Hey guys, it's me again, still getting worked up for Halloween. So I thought I'd jump online again and read another story. This one is from my collection, little mini chapbook, Bleak Precision. Was shortlisted for an Australian Shadows Award last year. And it's out on Amazon now in paperback. It's got illustrations in there and about 10 stories. So the story I'm going to read is The Pest Controller's Wife. So here we go. Selena Burns awoke to the sound of scratching. The noise was faint, a gentle scraping coming from the walls of the bedroom. It was the same way she awoke every morning, like some sort of alarm clock that worked by sending goosebumps through the flesh. Selena gritted her teeth in frustration and rolled onto her side to alert her husband to the noise, but his side of the bed was cold. She scanned the room for him, quickly finding his tall frame hunched over an ironing board in the corner. The rising sun cast a sickly yellow glow on his bare chest and back. Steam from the iron hissed loudly as he pressed his uniform. "Those damn mice are in the walls again," Selena snapped. "When are you going to get rid of them, Sean?" At first, Sean ignored her, focused only on removing the creases in his navy blue shirt. The bright yellow embroidered insignia of a cockroach on the chest pocket gleamed. "I haven't had the chance," Sean replied, not looking at her. Selena stood and pulled her nightgown over her thighs, seemingly self-conscious. "You could have done it on the weekend." Sean flipped his shirt over and began to press the back. "I had to do the inventory on the weekend, Selena. You knew that." "Well, I'm sick of that noise, Sean. You have to get rid of them. I don't want them in my house. They're disgusting." Sean turned, a stern look on his face. A handsome face, but one that carried very little expression these days. For months, Selena had wondered who her husband was and when he had changed. "I'll get to it eventually," he told her. "Okay?" He shook the residual heat out of the shirt and slipped it over his arms, almost ceremoniously. Selena hated Sean's job, the thought of him chasing rodents and spraying bugs, but it put food on the table and he seemed dedicated to making a living from it. "Do I have to pay you to get it done?" she said. "What?" "Well, you're quite happy to run off to strangers' homes and kill their pests. What about the ones in our house?" Sean chuckled and shook his head. "You're the one who doesn't want the chemicals near the house." "That's to protect the kids, Sean," she replied. Sean grimaced and refocused on buttoning his shirt. He turned his back on Selena and considered himself in the mirror. "I have to go to work," he said. Sean hardly spoke another word to Selena or the kids at breakfast. In fact, he didn't even eat breakfast. He was engrossed with his job, silently scanning the list on his clipboard of homes he had to visit that day, homes reportedly infested with pests. Selena tried not to listen to the scratching in the walls as she spoon-fed their 6-month-old daughter Karen. Her young ears were not mature enough to hear the crawling din. She made her own noise by slapping her hands on the high chair. Their older daughter, Anne, however, was well aware of the scratching. "Do we have mice?" she asked. Sean turned to look at Anne warily. "Yes, we do, honey," her mother said, glaring at her husband from across the breakfast table. "Daddy's going to get rid of them soon." Sean's eyes shifted to his wife. "I told you I would get rid of them when I had the chance." He slammed the clipboard on the table, rattling his untouched plate of eggs on toast. The scratching suddenly ceased. "Don't you yell at me, Sean," Selena said. "All I'm asking is for you to throw a bait in there or something. Anything." Sean gathered his clipboard and mobile telephone and put on his coat. Selena could see his face burning with suppressed rage. What on earth is wrong with him, she wondered. Before she could raise her concern, he was headed for the front door, bag in hand. He hadn't even packed a lunch. "Sean, wait," Selena called. The door slammed and the scratching started all over again. 193 Harrington Street was the first job on Sean's list. Pest Pesticide was one of the largest pest control and extermination companies in the country, with more than 50 stations across Australia. Its exterminators had the ability and the capacity to find, capture and exterminate all pests of the vermin or insect variety. Sean became an exterminator when he was 25, 3 years before he met Selena. 6 months later, she became pregnant with Anne. 7 years on, and they'd added Karen to the fold. Sean was happy and he loved his kids, but since Karen's birth, Selena had become difficult and critical of Sean's line of work. Being a pest controller meant the world to Sean. It was his lifeblood, and with Selena a stay-at-home mum, his job was the family's only source of income. Yet it was more than a job. Sean knew he was providing a service. He was taking away insects and vermin that people didn't want around them. He was separating species that didn't deserve to live together in the same home. He parked his bright yellow pesticide work van in the driveway of number 193 Harrington and rechecked the worksheet. Possible cockroach infestation was written in the complaint column. Cockroaches were all too common in unkempt homes, but number 193 looked like it belonged to a well-to-do family or couple. A tall blonde woman, about 35, answered the door. She looked quite stunning with her tight tan slacks, cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. "Oh, you're finally here," she said. "Thank goodness. These bugs are all over the place and I don't know why." "Mrs. Campion, is it?" Sean inquired. "Yes, that's right. My name's Sean and I'm a pest controller for Pesticide. Please come in and call me Judy." Sean stepped into a wide vestibule decorated with marble floors and an oak spiral staircase. A bust of some unknown bald man sat on the mantelpiece. Sean was right. The cockroaches certainly didn't belong in such a place. "Could you please show me where the cockroaches are?" "Of course, this way," Judy said, smiling pleasantly as she led Sean through the lavish living room with its ornate coffee table and fireplace to the kitchen. "They started coming out from under the sink the other morning," Judy explained. It was just awful. One of them crawled up my leg." Sean crouched and opened the doors of the sink cupboard. At least one cockroach retreated from the daylight into a small hole in the corner. "Oh, I see," Sean said. "Yep, just as I thought." "Is it bad?" Judy said, chewing her fingernails. "The cockroaches have eaten a hole in your cupboard and they're coming into the house that way. You see these little brown flecks? That's cockroach feces, and quite a lot of it. And those little white things there? They're eggs. I'd say you've definitely got an infestation here." He turned to her, smiling. "Did you know that out of the 4,000 species of cockroach in the world, only 30 species cohabitate with humans, and only 4 species are considered pests?" Judy swallowed. No, I didn't know that. Can you kill them? I've got a dinner party this weekend and I'd hate for one of the guests to see those horrible things in my house." Sean set his bag on the breakfast bar and added considerably more professionalism to his smile. "Of course, I'll remove them for you." The rest of Sean's workday was quite busy. After he finished at the Campion home, he had to deal with a rat up a drain pipe at an old people's home. The metaphor didn't get past the residents. And a minor redback spider infestation at a doctor's surgery in the city. After clocking off at the office and filling in the appropriate paperwork, Sean set off for home, dreading his wife's persistent demands. At least insects and vermin didn't make demands. The scratching in the walls was slowly driving Selena insane. The mice seemed to be concealed in the hallway, the kitchen, and even the bathroom. She could imagine them leaving their filth in the wall space, their little incisors tearing through plasterboard. The thought of their hairy little shapes scurrying about while she slept made her want to retch. No, she didn't need him to get rid of the pests. She could do it herself. She told Anne to put on her shoes and bundled her and Karen in the car. They drove 8 blocks to the corner store. "What are we buying, Mummy?" Anne asked. Selena grabbed 6 mouse traps off the shelf and smiled widely. The mice would never know what hit them. And Sean? He'd get the surprise of his life when he saw he wasn't the man of the house anymore. Selena was dusting off her hands when Sean arrived home. From the moment he closed the door, he refused to look at her, but he enthusiastically hugged and kissed the children. She knew he found her annoying, a nagger, but she didn't care. He needed to take responsibility for his life outside of work. Perhaps her actions that afternoon would set him right. "I went out and got some mouse traps," she told Sean. Sean stopped dead and almost dropped Karen to the floor, his face drained of blood. "You what?" "I couldn't wait for you to get rid of them anymore, so I went down and bought some. I just finished setting them." Sean sprinted out of the living room down the hallway. He was in a mad panic. Selena's heart pounded and her mind burned. "Where did you put them?" Sean cried. "What? Why? What in God's name is wrong with you, Sean?" Sean whirled on her, his face sweaty, eyes afire. "Where did you put the traps, bitch?" Selena went to the girls, desperate to protect them. Sean was enraged, searching cupboards and bedrooms. The girls began to cry as their father bellowed and wailed. "Please, Sean, they're just mice," Selena begged. Sean was about to scream when a sharp crack struck the air, the sound of a mousetrap serving its purpose. Tears began to well up in his eyes. "No!" He turned and followed the noise, hurling himself down the kitchen steps to the laundry. Selena was afraid to follow, but her mind craved reason. She needed to know why her husband was overwrought with grief over the death of something he'd spent years exterminating. "Sean!" Then she found him, cradling the mousetrap in his hands, its prey dangling lifeless, its spine broken in two. Sean was crying and tracing the mouse's fur with trembling fingers. After a moment, he lifted the steel mechanism and freed the mouse's body. The sight sickened Selena. "What are you doing?" Sean considered her with dark eyes before he gently placed the mouse on the ground. He strode to her and grabbed her by the hair. "Where are the rest?" Where?" "Over there." Selena pointed to a space behind the washing machine. "No!" Sean raced to the spot and wrenched the washing machine out of the way. Selena's stomach lurched when she saw what was behind it. A hole, about a foot wide, infested with tiny mice, dozens and dozens of them. She expected them to flee, but they seemed to huddle around Sean, circling his shoes, almost with affection. To her horror, she watched Sean kick away the mousetrap. "Oh God, Sean, what's happened to you?" Sean urged the mice back into the hole with tender touches, and the vermin complied. He replaced the washing machine and approached his terror-stricken wife. "Do you really want to know?" he sneered. He grabbed her by the hair again and dragged her up the stairs. Karen and Anne shrieked with fear as their mother's own screams resounded inside the house. The children watched helplessly as their father threw her before the refrigerator. As Sean pulled on the fridge and freed it from its cavity in the kitchen, a drawing of Sean with "I love Daddy" in Anne's crude writing fluttered through the air to the floor. Hundreds of cockroaches burst out from the wall behind the fridge, flying and crawling across every surface, spreading and spreading, closer and closer to Selena and her children. Sean smiled at them, like a proud father would his children. "This is my family," he told Selena. "My children." Selena screamed as the cockroaches followed Sean into the living room. The pest controller sat in his chair and the insects swarmed all over him, on his arms and hair and face, until all you could see were his eyes, dark and staring. "I saved them all," he said with squirming lips. One cockroach seemed to kiss him. "I've always saved them. They deserve to live too, even more so than you." He gazed at his wife as she cradled herself and her children in the corner of the room, like creatures that feared something greater than them. As the mice joined the ever-shifting, twitching throng that covered their master, Sean reached into his bag and retrieved a large box of rat sack. Then his voice rose above the scratching. "I think you need an exterminator." And that's the end of that story from my chapbook, Bleak Precision. Feel free to leave comments, and I'll also leave some links to purchase the book if you're interested. Thanks.